Good morning, Charged Up Studio listeners, and welcome back to another episode where you get charged up for success. I'm Dana Olivo, your host and CEO of Marketatomy LLC. Today, we're delving into the world of public relations, public policy, and grassroots mobilization. Our guest today brings over 25 years of extensive experience in both the policy and campaign arenas, offering a broad array of legislative, strategic, communications, and management skills that help clients build comprehensive, effective, and winning campaigns. A longtime veteran of Capitol Hill, sorry for you. He has served as a campaign manager, political director, and advisor on some of the most high-profile races in the nation and at the National Republican Congressional Committee. He understands the legislative process literally in and out, having served as both the Congressional Chief of Staff and Chief Executive at the Free Enterprise Fund, a nonprofit advocacy organization dedicated to advancing free market policies. Since founding TDS Public Affairs in 2007, he has provided strategic communications, public affairs, grassroots, and paid media services to Fortune 500 companies, trade associations, and nonprofit organizations. He has appeared on Fox News, CNN, and countless talk radio outlets across the country and has testified before Congress numerous times. So let's all please give a warm Charged Up Studio welcome to Mr. Jim Terry, CEO and President of TDS Public Affairs. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Dana. It's great to be with you all today.
No, I'm glad you're here. This is a subject that's very dear to my heart, mainly because I have a long-term vision on getting in front of Congress up there. And maybe you'll be able to help me down the road with that.
Absolutely. It's, long-term vision or not, the sort of reality of today is that everything is political. Things that used to be this kind of Chinese firewall and sort of as a business owner, or even, frankly, these days as a citizen, to some degree, everything is political and everything is a communications decision.
Right. No, exactly. So before we get started, can you tell me a little bit about how you got involved in this and why it appeals to you so much?
I lost a bet. No, my story began in college where I was kind of on a different track, and I sort of stumbled into politics, and we did a lot of work. My uncle, we were doing some development work out in Southern California. And that was kind of my first exposure to government and bureaucracy and kind of all of that stuff. And I always say that my path in politics started with the emotion of they can't do that. And, and so got into political campaigns and stayed there for many years. And then eventually found myself in DC working for congressional leadership and working as a chief of staff on the Hill. And, one of the things that I always tell young staffers is that at the end of the day, politics is not rocket science, it's people. If you've got enough of them with you, you win. And if you got enough of them against you, you lose. And so, when you're thinking about whether it's policy or communication strategy, or I think that's one of the things that's always sort of benefited me in this business is having lived in the real world and having walked a mile in those shoes, and the ability to kind of understand any issue from others' perspectives. And I think that's one of the things that has formed a foundation of our capabilities.
Interesting. It's especially in this time period with what we're going through right now. Even more so, you talked about there was a period in South California when you were working with your dad or whatever, and you questioned whether they could do things. that kind of thing. And, I know that there are a ton of people out here who are questioning what's happening up in DC and questioning what's happening with the government. And can they really do this, with what's going on and how it's going to affect us personally, not only in our personal lives, but in our business lives. They've basically taken a lot of control out of our hands.
Yeah, that's the one of the more interesting elements of sort of how the founding fathers set up the structure here in America is of, by, and for the people. And throughout sort of American history, there is this sort of constant tension and constant struggle. And that, as government, the size and scale and scope and the power of the federal government in particular has expanded, that struggle, tends to sort of weigh on one side of the scale more than others. But the reality still comes back to the ballot box in our system. Mm-hmm. And, the federal government is going to reflect either what they've been told to do or what they think they can get away with doing. And, sort of the signals that get sent. And you started to see some of this in across the country now, and sort of a reaction to everything that's been going on, whether it's, parents stepping up and beginning to run for school districts. That's a signal that says, we don't like the direction you're headed. This is not good. We're taking it back. And, you're seeing that, in the off-year elections in places like Virginia, where, not only did you have sort of a party switch, but when you look at the numbers underneath that, there were very substantial demographic shifts. And for instance, the Republican candidate there in Virginia won an outright majority of Latino voters. And that is a hugely substantial demographic shift. And, I think you have to, when you envision sort of American politics, have to remember that by and large, most people are not ideologues. They're mothers, they're fathers, they're entrepreneurs, and they want to do their thing. And then what happens is the government and conditions start they start feeling the pressure and start feeling the pains, and they react to that and they mobilize and they act. So there's this constant sort of ebb and flow, and series of corrections in American politics. And so I think the message I would sort of leave people with out of all of that is that the power of the individual is great. History books go back and they tend to kind of sanitize history and put it in this neat little box. And they say that this happened this way because it had to happen that way, because the arc of justice bends towards, or the arc of history bends towards justice. But the reality is, in every moment in history, was contingent. It was contingent upon the decisions that were made, the stands that people took, and what they did. And when we think about the sort of how the moment in history now feels so crazy, there have been crazier times. There was a time when hundreds of thousands of Americans were killing each other in the Civil War. Yeah. And America got through that. And that history was contingent upon a relatively small group of people standing up and making a fight. And so I think I would hearten people to know that, sort of the difference and the value that one individual and aggregating with other individuals can make. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree that, we've been through situations before, as far as that's concerned. What I see is, I agree with you. There's many more people who are starting to take a stand, especially in the beginning, when COVID came out and then the shots came out, and things like that. It was more or less, okay, the government knows what they're talking about. Let's go ahead. Let's follow their directive, that kind of thing. But then when it started getting to a point of mandating, and I say OSHA getting involved and things like that because of mandates put that way, kind of restricting our ability to be able to do business as usual, is where people have started coming out of the woodwork and starting to question. And now with all the different variations of the shots coming out and everything, what do you think? What do you believe the end result is going to be of this? Do you think this is something that's going to continue for quite a while, or what?
I think it's hard to really sort of tell what the, I saw an article the other day that says the end of the pandemic will not be televised. And typically there's, with pandemics and things like this, there's not some sort of big, climactic, cinematic end, where someone takes the podium and says, this is over.
Right.
They tend to be sort of people just wander off and peter out and it becomes sort of less and less of a threat. And I think, one of the distinctions we have is because of the way this has been approached, sort of perpetuating, entire industries have sprung up around sort of perpetuating this threat. But what you're seeing is a couple of things in this. You're seeing sort of the people, the citizenry say, look, we're done, right? It's time to move on. I'm looking around my world and I'm not seeing that many threats. And so, and even if it is a threat, at some point I got to get on with living. I can't just do this forever. And so I think you're seeing a shift in the citizenry in that direction. But I also think, and when you go back to kind of, America and what defines it, you're starting to see institutions catch up. So in the beginning, crisis, nobody knew anything. We've got to do anything, right? And then over time, a lot of data has been developed, a lot of practices have been developed, and, court cases are kind of, beginning to work their way through. And you're seeing sort of some of the institutions that provide the guardrails for things like this, start to assert themselves. Now, obviously, what decisions these institutions make, the Supreme Court, what they decide on things like mandates will absolutely sort of shape the path forward. But whether or not, they end up making a decision that you agree with, I think when you think about how the ability to correct that, the ability to change that, the ability to influence that at any point depends upon the vitality of these institutions. And I think, protecting these institutions is, of the utmost importance, because it's those institutions that protect the minority from the tyranny of the majority, that create the mechanisms for corrections. And so I think, you're starting to see this, and it's all, there's a lot of, cognitive dissonance in the media around all of this. And but it seems to me that we're definitely, trending towards some sort of a realignment here.
More of a balance about what's going on.
Yeah, I think people are taking, even in, New York, the CDC said today that kids who have been had contact exposure to a COVID case can stay in school if they're tested. So that by definition is a more an approach that reflects a new data set that we have, as opposed to kind of this blind approach of advocating the same prescriptions that we did when we knew nothing. And so you're seeing an evolution of things.
Exactly. Okay. As more and more data is coming out, as more and more people are able to make their own decisions based on that data, the freedom of choosing. Yeah.
And ultimately, regardless of what Fauci thinks or any government official thinks, the people will prevail in this. Yeah. They just will. And whatever decision the people make of what the approach is going to be going forward, you can issue all the mandates and guidelines you want to, but ultimately the people are going to determine what the final outcome of this looks like.
Very interesting. Well, I'm glad to hear that, and I've been feeling it myself as far as things starting to realign themselves, and right now with moving into 2022, I think we're going to see some major movement forward, as far as that's concerned too. So I hope.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that, ultimately, when I say the people will decide, it's a question of which people, right? And I think that is, when you talk about kind of the government and what it's doing or not doing, by and large, it is a reflection of either people's proactive opinions, we want this, or it's a reflection of people's failure to participate in the process. And I think, what you're seeing is a lot of people sort of engaging in meaningful ways that, whichever direction it goes, left, right up the center, will be reflective of those people who engage in the process.
Exactly, exactly. So let's move on a little bit to what it is that you do and how do you um, how do you act as the voice for individuals or businesses out there in front of government? What is the process that you generally will take?
Sure. We're a public affairs and public relations firm. And so when people think about, public relations, you're typically thinking about talking about something you're doing, telling a story.
Mhm.
And what we find is very often is that your story is most interesting to you, and it's not necessarily as interesting to other people or as relevant. And so a lot of what we do is help you define your story, and then identify sort of how can we relate that story to other people so that it is so that they care enough to take whatever action it is you're wanting them to take. And a lot of times, what you're doing is not sufficient to even tell that story. And that's where kind of our public affairs side comes in too, in which we work with people to develop strategies to do things that are newsworthy, that do things that give the media a reason to write about your story. And that involves, sort of the full array of tactics and taking what you do and helping you do it in a way that reflects the story you want to tell and creates an opportunity for the media to cover it or for your targeted audiences to care.
Okay, okay. Well, as I stated earlier, I'm on a mission myself personally with my company, with Market Atomy. I originally got into this and started working with Market Atomy with micro business owners because first I'd failed in business twice before and could not find help. Okay. And secondly, because I saw the numbers, I saw the data of the number of small businesses that were failing, and what is happening out there. And I see personally these business owners who fail and how it affects them, not only themselves, emotionally, but their families and everything. And so Market Atomy has been developed to provide that element of support, accountability, and resource management for these micro business owners who are having to close their doors because they can't find the help that they need. But not only that, they don't know what they don't know about running a successful business. And so ultimately, that's what I'm doing right now is to bring that education and that resource management and everything to these small micro business owners. All right. But at the same time, what I want to do, my long-term, what you call BHAG vision is I want to get in front of Congress and I want to change, the economy for micro business owners to the point where before they go and get their business license or whatever, if they can show that they have gone through a program, certification, or whatever that taught them how to run a successful business, that they could be entitled to some incentives that would help them manage that business in the early years or months of that business. So is that something that, I can't help but believe that if we can reduce the number of failed businesses in the US, that it's only going to have a positive impact on our GDP as more money is pumped into our economy and help with our labor force as more jobs are filled, things like that. But not only that, the psyche of the business owner and ultimately their families. Because look at what COVID is doing right now. Okay, we've had such a large increase of small business license applications because people are displaced or they've decided, I'm not going back to work. I'm going to work for myself.
Yeah, I think when you think about sort of the small businesses, you talk about the small businesses closing, and in the very early stages of COVID, I had the privilege of participating in a program that a friend of mine put together, and the premise of this was that there was this early period when businesses were closed and the Fed pot had not been opened up yet, and the businesses were disallowed from working, disallowed from operating, and they were just sitting there. And this fund was kind of developed as sort of a small sort of bridge, just something to help. And it was, it was like up to, a couple of $1,000s. You just apply. And if you met a few simple criteria, it was just money. It was just cash, right? But part of the application process was sending a video in. And I can't tell you how excruciating it was to listen to these people's stories, because, when you think about a small business, you tend to think about it from the standpoint of paying the light bill and putting the kids through college and paying the mortgage from sort of a financial benefit. And what what listening to these people, you realize is, money was certainly, the revenue was certainly important, but you're talking about life's works, dreams. You're talking about, my husband got out of jail and couldn't get a job, so we started this business, and now he's now he's so proud of himself and his life. You're talking about, substantial life things that go far and beyond, the economic implications of this. And so I think, both economically, as well as sort of societally, these small businesses are important. But when you think about it from particularly from a federal government perspective, very often, the assistance is monetary, right? If you meet a certain criteria of, if you're a female business owner or a minority business owner, or different ways, but even that aid comes in the form of a loan, something that has to be paid back, and not necessarily in the form of valuing, incentivizing, sort of education. And I think, this would be something that, to me, I think if you're able to demonstrate this concept, at a state level, and, from your strict constitutionalist perspective, the states as sort of the incubators of good ideas, right? Demonstrate this at, the effectiveness of this approach at some sort of a state level, to incentivize not only the opening of a business, but to incentivize the effective management of it so that it endures. And that'll have implications for the national deficit, in the national debt, because, people that have their own flourishing businesses don't require assistance, don't require, financial assistance. They, pay for their own insurance and food and whatnot. And so, that kind of growth would be good for on a lot of levels.
No, I agree. And that's, I am starting out on the municipal and the state level as far as this is concerned. Like I said, it's my long-term, vision to make this happen. But we're at the grassroots initial part of this. And, prior to COVID, I was doing a lot of this one-on-one with seminars and things like that. Well, since COVID came in, I pivoted and took everything online. So now we have an e-learning environment that's committed only to small businesses, so that they can get this education and things like that on their own, in their own time, and those kind of things. But, the number of failed businesses that we are experiencing right now, and then with the increase that we've had since COVID started, it bothers me in the fact where what's going to happen 2 years down the road, if they don't learn the skill levels that they need, what they need to know, they don't know about, growing their businesses.
Yeah. I've always kind of viewed small business as, a series of mistakes, and that you learn from, and you learn and you grow from that. But, it's also difficult when you're the, head cook and chief bottle washer, right? Because it's, in a micro environment, those challenges are greater. But I think, it's also, sort of a question of what are the business owners' part as well. You can create all of these, incentives that you want, and you can have a lot of people take advantage of them, but still aren't really going to, commit to doing the things that they need to do. And so I think that, there's a lot of, I think challenges in the concept here from the standpoint of, the appropriate role of government. And, but I also think this is a classic kind of an example when you think about it from a communications and a strategy standpoint of, selling this, not necessarily is it because it's good for the small business owners. That's not why, people will necessarily support it. It'll be good for how's it good for them? How's it good for that small business owner's neighbor? How's it good for the nation? How's it good for taxpayers? How's it good for, for everyone else? And because, ultimately, when you think about, government and particularly government resources, you're taking the resources of everybody.
Right.
And ostensibly are supposed to be using those resources to the benefit of everyone.
Right.
And, when you get into these things. And so but I do think, even short of, financial incentives or even short of things that have cost associated, there is certainly an incentive for, we do have this entire SBA, entire bureaucracy dedicated to this kind of stuff. And so I think, it's a fair question to say, are there ways in which we could be utilizing that aggregation of knowledge that already exists and turn that towards, a more specific mission?
Right. And again, talking about SBA, and I'm familiar with SBA and I know about it and worked with them before. Same thing with SBDC, and all this other stuff. But again, we run into a situation where the programs that they offer, the companies that qualify have to be making their second level, their second stage companies. All right. They're not there to help those small micro business owners because the money's not there.
Right. Right.
But we make it so easy to start a business here. Less than $100 and you can be in business. But the thing is we don't make it easy to stay in business. And it shouldn't be easy to survive in business. You should do the work as a business owner. If you're going to get in there, you should be doing the work. I agree. But where do they get that help to do the work?
Right. That's what I say, and look, no amount of training is going to protect you from the forces of the marketplace. Right.
That's true.
And so, and that's why when you think about the SBA and you think about, the programs that they're offering, I think there, should be opportunity, because what you're effectively, advocating here is an educational component.
Yeah.
And, to me, that, would be something that, would be within the purview of the mission of that agency.
Yeah.
And that, perhaps they're not effectively executing or they're maybe focused too much on other aspects of it. But, to me, when you think about, the proliferation of these small businesses, there's a bigger political piece to it as well. It's independence. It's, diversified market share. When you have sort of multinational, multi-conglomerates that have, massive market share, there's a lot that goes with that, a lot of control, a lot of not just economic control, but, of late, sort of almost governmental control of implementing policies. And so to the extent that you're, proliferating these small, small businesses, you're also creating sort of independence. And I think that's important over the long haul.
No, I agree. No, it makes a lot of sense. And I know, I've known from the very beginning, it's not going to be an easy journey. It's going to be a uphill battle the whole way, but I just think that it just needs to be brought to the attention. And that's all I can do, So.
Yeah. And, and look, and that's, Rome was not built in a day, and it's, a lot of the issues that, you see at the federal level that seem like they went from 0 to 60, that just suddenly overnight appeared. There were people toiling for a decade before and socializing the concept and perfecting it and building allies and when you're looking for significant change, it's not something it is something that rarely, is really kind of overnight. Even if you look at, on some of the fronts that, some of the changes that happened, in the wake of George Floyd. There were, a lot of policies that people were trying to implement. And while that tragic and sort of outrageous event was a catalyst for it, the foundations of all of this stuff were laid long before that moment.
Right. Well, we're coming up to the close of another program here. Tell me something. For all of my listeners out there, if they wanted to get into the public relations or move on with some public relations, getting in front of government or whatever, how would they go about doing that?
Call us.
Okay.
Yeah. So, what we'll typically do with people is to, kind of sit down and, and first and foremost, understand what's your objective. What do you want to achieve? And then we start thinking through, okay, what are you working with? And that kind of gives you the playing field, right? What are you working with resource wise? What are you working with environmentally? How does your issue sort of fit into the kind of the dominant narratives and the things that are moving or salient at the moment? And that's where we start sort of now crafting out kind of that strategy. The tactical piece underneath that is driven from all of that. And so it starts with us understanding what it is you want to achieve and what your story is. And so whether it's, I've kind of sort of, because of our conversation, sort of locked onto this sort of issue and sort of big change, but this is, it's not necessarily limited to that. Is if you're rolling out a new policy, and particularly, with all of this COVID stuff, people have, had to roll out different policies. And I suspect many small businesses owners understand just how political policy decisions can be. And so, whether it's a new policy, a new product, whatever it is, whatever story it is you're trying to tell, we would start with understanding that story and identifying a strategy that moves forward from there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we could go on and on on some of this stuff, but I think this program kind of gives us a little bit of a background or a base on where we can move from. And I know I'll be talking to you more about my issue and what I want to do, as far as that's concerned. But do me a favor and tell our audience how they can get a hold of you.
TDSpublicaffairs.com is probably the most efficient way to reach us. We have some information about what we do and how we do it and why we do it, and then there's a contact page and our phone numbers on that website as well.
Okay, great. Well, this has been really nice. That concludes our podcast for today. And please leave a review on any of the streaming platforms you are listening to us on, or go to our Charged Up Studio Facebook page and leave a review there. Charged Up Studio is a product of Market Academy, the e-learning environment that's designed specifically for the micro business owner. For more information and to register for our many courses, go to marketacademy.academy. And once again, thank you, Jim Terry, for joining us today. And that's it. Talk to you all later. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dan.